Sitting in the Concord departure lounge at Heathrow on a perfect blue June morning, Anthony, 2nd Baron Baddingham, chairman and managing director of Corinium Television, should have been perfectly happy. He was blessed with great wealth, a title, a brilliant career, a beautiful flat in Kensington, houses in Gloucestershire and Tuscany, a loyal, much-admired wife, 3 charming children, and a somewhat demanding mistress, to whom he had just bidden a long farewell on the free telephone beside him. He was about to fly on his favourite aeroplane, Concorde, to his favourite city, New York, to indulge in his favourite pastime, selling Corinium's programmes to American television and raising American money to make more programmes. Tony Baddingham was a great believer in using other people's money, or OPM, as he called it. Then, if a project bombed, someone else picked up the bill. As a final bonus, neatly folded beside him were the morning papers, which he'd already read, in the Post House Hotel, and which all contained glowing reports of Corinium's past 6 months' results, announced yesterday. Just as he had been checking out of the Post House an hour earlier, however, Tony's perfect pleasure had been ruined by the sight of his near neighbour and long-term rival, Rupert Campbell-Black, checking in. He was scribbling his signature with one hand and holding firmly onto a rather grubby but nonetheless ravishing girl with the other. The girl, who had chipped nail polish, wildly tangled blonde hair, mascara smudged under her eyes and a deep suntan, had obviously been pulled out of some other bed and was giggling hysterically. "Rupert," she wailed, "there simply isn't time, you'll miss the plane." "It'll wait," said Rupert, and gathered up his keys, started to drag her towards the lift. As the doors closed like curtains coming down on the first act of a play, Tony could see the two of them glued together in a passionate embrace. A deeply competitive man, Tony had felt dizzy with jealousy. He had seldom, particularly since he had inherited the title and become chief executive of Corinium, had any difficulty attracting women. But he'd never attracted anything so wantonly desirable and desiring as that grubby, vaguely familiar blonde. "More coffee, Lord Baddingham?" One of the beautiful attendants in the Concord lounge interrupted Tony's brooding. He shook his head, comforted by the obvious admiration in her voice. "Shouldn't we be boarding?" he asked. "We'll be a few minutes late. There was a slight engineering problem. They're just doing a last-minute check." Tony glanced round the departure lounge, filled with businessmen and American tourists, and noticed a pale, red-headed young man in a grey pinstripe suit, who had stopped his steady flow of writing notes on a foolscap pad and was looking apprehensively at his watch. Boarding the plane 20 minutes later, Tony found himself sitting up at the front in an inside seat with a Jap immersed in a portable computer on his right. Across the gangway next to the window sat the young man in the pinstripe suit. He was even paler now, and looking distinctly put out. "Good morning, Lord Baddingham," said a stewardess, handing Tony that day's newly flown-in copy of the Wall Street Journal. "Engineering fault sorted out?" asked Tony, as the engine started revving up. Not quite meeting his eyes, the girl nodded brightly. Then, looking out of the window, she seemed to relax as a black car raced across the tarmac. Next, there was a commotion as a light, flat, familiar drawl could be heard down the gangway. "Frightfully sorry to hold you all up. Traffic was diabolical." All the stewardesses seemed to converge on the new arrival, fighting to carry his newspaper and put his hand luggage up in the locker. "Won't you be needing your briefcase, Minister?" asked a male steward, shimmying down the gangway. Rupert Campbell-Black shook his head. "No thanks, sweetheart." "Have a nice ziz, then," said the male steward, going crimson with pleasure at the endearment. As the doors slammed shut, Rupert collapsed into the seat across the gangway from Tony. Wearing a crumpled cream suit, a blue striped shirt, dark glasses, and with 1/8 of an inch of stubble on his chin, he looked more like a rock star than one of Her Majesty's ministers.